The journey begins. In the winter of 1992, high in the Annapurna region of Nepal, the world seemed made of light. Snow gleamed like glass beneath a sun that shone cold and distant, and the air carried the clean, sharp scent of ice and pine. James Scott, a young Australian doctor, walked slowly along the narrow path that curved above the valley floor. Beside him was Cheryl Templar, bright-eyed, warm-voiced, her laughter soft against the thin wind. They were not mountaineers, not seeking to conquer or boast. They were travellers, lovers, drawn to the quiet majesty of the Himalayas. For them, the mountains were not obstacles, they were promises, a place where the world would fall silent enough for their hearts to be heard. The mountains calm. The villages they passed were small, their houses built from stone and wood, their walls brushed with the smoke of long winters. Children waved as the pair passed, and old women offered tea that steamed in the cold air. The sound of yak bells drifted through the valleys, slow, steady music echoing against the mountainsides. At night they slept under rough blankets in tea houses, where frost crept across the windows and the stars seemed close enough to touch. James would write in his small notebook, and Cheryl would rest her head on his shoulder. They talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversations that live on between people who love deeply, where words are less important than presence. The calm before the snow. The morning of the storm began like any other. A soft wind blew down from the high passes, and the sky was a pale, gentle blue. They packed lightly, chocolate, a little food, and James's small medical kit. Their plan was simple, a short day's walk before returning to lower ground. But the weather in the Himalayas is a creature of moods, and that day it changed without warning. By afternoon the wind sharpened, whipping snow from the peaks like breath from a sleeping god. Clouds folded over the ridges, heavy and grey. The light dimmed to a strange silver dusk. Still they walked, believing the storm would pass as quickly as it came, but soon the world vanished into white. The blizzard snow came down in walls, thick, fast, relentless. It buried the path, erased the landmarks, and turned the air itself into a blur of motion. They could see only a few feet ahead. Their voices were lost to the wind. The cold bit through layers of clothing, finding skin, bone, and breath. James shouted, but his words dissolved into the storm. Cheryl took his hand. That small contact, warm skin against cold glove, became their compass, their only direction. They walked until their legs trembled, then stopped, surrounded by a silence so heavy it felt as though the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The snow cave. As night fell, they dug. With numb hands and desperate purpose, they scooped snow with metal cups and bare fingers, carving a hollow space into a drift, a fragile refuge between life and the storm. Inside it was small and dark, the air damp and heavy with their breath. They huddled together, their bodies pressed close for warmth. The sound of the wind became a heartbeat outside, the pulse of a world too vast to fight. James melted ice in a small metal cup, held over a candle flame. They drank it slowly, the water thin and metallic, but alive with hope. Their food was a few squares of chocolate, broken carefully, shared without a word. The first night. In the blackness of the snow cave, time lost its shape. James listened to Cheryl's breathing, steady, fragile, human, a rhythm stronger than the storm outside. He thought of home, of Australia's wide skies, of sunlight on water, of her hand in his before all this white began. Outside the storm screamed and roared, but inside their tiny cave 2 hearts beat together, slow, calm, defiant. It was not courage that kept them alive that night. It was love. The simple, unspoken decision to keep each other warm until morning came, the longest morning. When they woke, it was still snowing. The storm had not passed in the night. It had only deepened, a white ocean swallowing the sky. James pushed open the entrance of the cave, but the world was gone. Only the soft hiss of falling snow and a horizon erased by cloud. They had food for 2 days. They hoped the storm might end in 1, but hope, in the mountains, moves differently than time. Counting the days. They began to mark days by the small things: a melted cup of ice, a shared piece of chocolate, the faint glow of light through packed snow that told them morning had come again. Each sunrise was a gift. Each night survived was a quiet victory. The snow pressed in around them, its weight constant, its silence endless. And yet, within that stillness, something beautiful endured. Their hands found each other again and again, as though remembering what it meant to be human. Body heat. When night came, the temperature dropped to unthinkable lows. They took turns being the blanket, their bodies wrapped together, breath mingling in the dark. James would pull her close, feeling her trembling fade against him. Sometimes they spoke in whispers, dreams of home, of sunlight, of laughter that felt far away. Other times they spoke not at all. Silence became their language, their closeness, their survival. Doctors would later say it was their shared warmth that saved them from hypothermia, that their love, in a literal sense, kept their hearts from freezing. The hunger. By the second week, their food was gone. They scraped melted snow from the cave walls, boiled it when they could, and let the ice water run slowly over their tongues. It had no taste, no comfort, yet it meant another day alive. Sometimes, when James drifted into half-sleep, he imagined the taste of bread, the salt of butter, the sweetness of mango. Cheryl would wake him softly, her voice fragile but still carrying a smile. "You were dreaming," she'd whisper. "You were eating." And he would laugh, a small breathless sound that filled their little cave with warmth. The mirror of each other. They began to see themselves reflected in one another. When James lost hope, Cheryl would hold him, her eyes fierce, unyielding. When her hands shook from cold, he would rub them between his palms until feeling returned. They were no longer 2 people surviving. They were a single, fragile flame guarded against the dark, the outside world. Far below, in the valleys, search parties moved along the trails, villagers, guides, and later, helicopters searching the snowfields. But the storm had wiped away all signs. The mountain kept its silence, and their small snow cave remained unseen, tucked into a drift near the edge of a ravine. For 43 days the world went on without them, and still they breathed, shared warmth, and waited. Faith in the white. On the 30th day they stopped counting. The numbers had become meaningless. All that mattered was each other, heartbeat to heartbeat, breath to breath. Outside the world was a frozen ocean, but inside they had found a kind of peace. They spoke of the past less and less, and more of what was immediate. The sound of the snow shifting, the scent of her hair, the feel of his heartbeat under her hand. Even in hunger, in fear, they discovered something rare. A love stripped of everything unnecessary. Only presence, only being, only the warmth of another life beside one's own. Time becomes a whisper. In the snow cave, Days and nights folded into one another, time slipping away like the meltwater dripping quietly from the ice. James and Cheryl existed in a world of shadows and silence, where the past felt distant and the future uncertain. The walls of snow that held them were both prison and sanctuary, a fragile eternity carved from frozen breath and hope. Visions in the white hunger and cold began to blur the edges of reality. James saw flickers, glimpses of colours that weren't there, faces that smiled and vanished, whispers carried on the wind. Cheryl felt the same. Her dreams a tapestry woven from memories and fears, of home, of laughter, of a life that seemed impossibly far away. Yet even in these moments they reached for each other, holding tight, anchoring themselves in the warmth of a hand, a touch, a promise. The strength of love. They spoke less, but their connection deepened. No words could express the fierce determination that grew between them, a silent vow to survive, to hold on, to find the other waiting beyond the snow. Their love was no longer a feeling, it was a lifeline, a force strong enough to defy the cold, to push back the creeping numbness. The first signs. On the 41st day, a faint sound drifted through the whiteness, a distant hum almost lost beneath the roar of the wind. James pressed his ear against the snow wall, listening, hoping. Cheryl sat beside him, her breath steady, her eyes wide with cautious wonder. They dared to believe that rescue might be near, that the mountain might finally release its hold. The wait for 2 more days, they held their breath, watching, waiting, clinging to the faintest thread of hope. When the rescuers finally arrived, their voices broke through the silence like sunlight piercing a storm. The rescue. The men who found them could barely believe their eyes. 2 figures, thin, frostbitten but alive, huddled in a cave of snow, still holding each other. The doctors said it was their shared body heat that saved them, their emotional bond that kept the cold at bay. James and Cheryl were carried down from the mountains, back to the warmth of civilization, back to the world of touch and sound and light. Returned to light in hospitals and homes, their story spread like wildfire. Not just a tale of survival, but a testament to the quiet power of love. A modern miracle whispered on the wind, etched forever in the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas. Back to warmth. The hospital was a world away from the cold silence of the cave. Bright lights, soft voices, the hum of machines, all a blur after 43 days trapped in snow. James and Cheryl lay side by side, their bodies weak but their spirits tethered tightly together. The doctors spoke of frostbite, dehydration, exhaustion, but the couple's greatest victory was something unseen, the warmth they had kept alive between them. Healing together. Recovery was slow, gentle, marked by small triumphs and quiet frustrations. They relearned how to feel warmth in their fingers and toes, how to walk in the sun without fear. But it was their hearts that healed first, bound by an unspoken understanding forged in white silence. They would often sit together, hands intertwined, eyes reflecting memories too vast for words. A love strengthened. Their love, tested by the mountain's merciless grip, emerged stronger, deeper, and infinitely more precious. It was a love not only of passion, but of trust, endurance, and shared survival. They carried within them the echo of the snow cave, a sacred space where time stood still and only their bond mattered. Public wonder. When their story reached Australia, it touched a nation. Headlines called it a miracle. 2 lovers saved by warmth and will. People marvelled at the resilience of the human spirit, and the quiet power of connection in the face of nature's fury. Yet James and Cheryl remained humble, preferring to speak softly about the experience. For them, the true story was not just survival, but the sacred gift of love shared in the coldest moments. The mountain's lesson. The Himalayas are forever, silent witnesses to human dreams and struggles. James and Cheryl's journey became part of the mountain story, a whisper on the wind, a reminder that even in the darkest cold, the warmth of two hearts can light the way. A quiet promise. They carried their experience quietly, not as a burden, but as a blessing. A promise to each other, and to all who hear their tale, that love can endure beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond silence. The echoes of the mountain. The mountains hold memory like ice holds water, slowly, silently, endlessly. For James and Cheryl, the snow cave was more than a refuge. It was a sacred place where time folded and stretched, where love was the thread that held everything together. Even as they returned to life below the peaks, the mountains whispered in their bones. Life beyond the snow years passed, and the world moved forward with relentless pace. Yet, for them, moments remained suspended. Those 43 days carved deep into their souls, a quiet monument to endurance, faith, and connection. They carried the mountain's lessons with them, the strength found in stillness, the power of holding on, and the beauty of shared warmth in the coldest night. Love as survival. Their story reminds us all that survival is not just a matter of body, but of spirit and heart. In the coldest, most desperate hours, it was their love that kindled a fire bright enough to keep death at bay. A fire fed by whispered promises, by hands clasped in the dark, by breaths shared beneath a blanket of snow. A modern miracle. The headlines called it a miracle, but miracles are not always loud or grand. Sometimes they are found in the quiet embrace of two people, in the slow, steady rhythm of hope, and in the light that shines through even the deepest cold. The lasting gift. James and Cheryl's journey continues, not only in the pages of history, but in the hearts of those who hear their tale. A gift reminding us to cherish warmth, to hold close the ones we love, and to find courage not just in strength, but in tenderness. The final image picture. A snow-covered mountain at dusk, soft pinks and blues fading into night. Two figures stand, wrapped in blankets, hands held tight against the chill. The wind sighs through the pines, carrying with it the silent song of survival and love. The mountain watches quietly, as it always has, and as it always will. Fade out. The snow melts, the seasons turn, but the bond forged in 43 days of white silence remains unbroken, timeless, enduring, and infinitely warm.